Hi, my name is Peti Lau, and my firm is Peti Lau Inc. Today we are here at Harbinger. It's one of my favorite showrooms here at the LaCienega Design Quarter. LCDQ has been such an important design week in LA, and it was one of the times, I think a couple years ago, I had come here to LA before I actually started working in Los Angeles, because I was living in New York. I recently moved to LA, and it was just an opportunity where you had to meet so many amazing West Coast designers and editors from New York. It's basically like spring break for designers. So my icon is David Hicks, and he was the first person that I had picked out of the legendary. He is a huge influence in a lot of my work. I think, and I truly believe, I have a style called Aristo Freak, and he really is an Aristo Freak. An Aristo Freak to me is someone that has the ability to really, have traditions, but really think outside of the box of the tradition, really break the molds. I think every good designer will always have rooted history in their traditions and patterns. And I think David Hicks had this incredible mix of just panache. He really designed with, just such bold patterns and colors. And even today, when you're looking at his work, I think a lot of influences are still being inspired today. He was the king of pattern mixing, and I definitely feel like I use a lot of patterns and colors to tell my story. What makes David Hicks' work so iconic is that I think, as I got to discover a little bit more about him, just beside his actual designs, I learned that he was already mixing like high and low at the time. He was kind of a scrapper. He grew up, his story is so interesting because he kind of grew up as a common person, and was very charming, had a lot of taste, was very intelligent. And then, of course, he fell in love with Lady Mountbatten, which is Dickie Mountbatten, Prince Charles's godfather, I believe. Was a royalty and basically married into that family. And obviously he was already quite an influential designer at the time that they had married, but he had the ability and access to have some of the most incredible properties. He was on a plane with the sheikh and designing all these incredible spaces, but he was always quite scrappy and doing designs with, he would figure out something and just kind of do a detail of like a trim, and like that could be $5 or £5 or whatever it was, and then he would apply it. But it was his aesthetic and how he looked at design, which was really important. And I think design is very much about a style. Everyone has a very particular taste or techniques, but I think he just had this like panache of just understanding, and he was bold, and he was he had a very interesting point of view. That's a really great question, because when I was asked to do Legends, I was so thrilled because, it's been such an influential part of my design, you know, a community being, especially since I just moved to LA, and I was like, this is my LA debut. And so I was really honored to be a part of it. And secondly, I was really nervous because everyone is judging you, obviously. And I was like, what do I do? And, I didn't want to necessarily like design a space that looked or was like mimicking him. So I had to really think about what I was doing. How do I interpret David Hicks into the work that I do, but that still very much has my aesthetic, that still has very much his traditions and his ideas. So I really played on with the pattern mix. The wallpaper is actually my own Aristo Freak wallpaper that I created, which is a African mudcloth inspired fabric that I had found. And then I channeled it with different colors. I've done different colorways, and I scaled it to make it the right size, and I printed on paper weave. So I really wanted to start with the wallpaper. And then of course I used Merce Studios to do the caning on the floor with a lot of pattern. And sometimes it was kind of challenging because I was nervous that maybe, the pattern mixing was the scale. Scale is so important, and I thought maybe it wasn't enough, but so far everything is turning out really well. So I had my wallpaper, obviously, which is what I started with. And then Merce Studios is a company that I've been wanting to work with for a while. They do amazing digitally printed wood tiles, and they can be any kind of crazy fun pattern. And I found this awesome black and white caning flat pattern, which I thought it's kind of very like David Hicks's, kind of like vintagey, and it also had this like LA vibe. So I love the kind of natural, the caning, and I'm kind of obsessed with cane at the moment. So I implemented that. I also love to shop a lot of antiques, so I really mixed a lot of like 18th century antiques and mid-century pieces as well. So that kind of modern and aristocratic, 18th century and like 70s pop, that kind of like mix, and that's very much my style. And of course, using antique rugs from Mark Phillips. John D. Nelson is one of the amazing paintings, and the rams that I used. Paul Ferrante is another company that I love, and they have such beautiful stuff. Every time I go in there, I'm always swooning. Of course, a lot of Harbinger items, the mirror, or some vintage pieces, and the commode. And my art, I actually was at the fair in New York, and I bought this amazing Peter Blake art called Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. And Peter Blake is an iconic English pop artist that was really famous and did... what is his name? He did the Beatles cover, and that's how he became super famous in like the 60s, I believe. And it was just this awesome woman who was this naked in her tattoo, and it's called Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. And I juxtapositioned it with this like beautiful 1930s like aristocratic woman that's just fabulous and bohemian, and you can't, I just love her. Of course, I used a lot of beautiful stuff from Martin Lawrence Bullard, who I also love, and it was this perfect kind of like mid-century pieces that were really that pop. The black and white benches was his. So a lot of my influence of what I design is also based on worldly. It's very romantic, it's eclectic, and so it's tying all of those different things to tell a story. So I feel like my space is pretty aristofreak, and it's very me. It's got a mix of everything. There's like ikat patterns and bouquet sheeps and stuff from England and stuff from all over in Marrakesh, and so it's just this worldly eclectic mix.